right, welcome back, everyone. As we know, AI is transforming how companies source, match, and place talent worldwide. While much of the AI conversations are driven by startups and tech firms, today we are looking at it through the lens of staffing, specifically how one of the largest staffing companies in the world, Randstad, is leveraging AI at scale. To help us unpack all of this, I'm thrilled to be joined by Glen Cathey, SVP of Talent Advisory and Digital Strategy at Randstad Enterprise. For those who don't know Glen, he's a strategic thinker, talent acquisition leader, and global keynote speaker who has been in the forefront of recruiting innovation for years now. He has led talent acquisition strategies for global firms with over 2 million hires annually, played key roles in implementing ATS, CRM, and AI-driven technology, and also built large-scale recruiting teams globally. He's also a highly sought-after speaker, so he's participated in LinkedIn Talent Connect, SourceCon, Talent 42, and many other global conferences. Today, we'll explore how Randstad is using AI and the challenges of implementing it, and also what the future of AI will look like from a staffing perspective. Glen, it's great to have you here today. Before we jump into the big questions, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about your work at Randstad?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the introduction. I have been in the staffing industry for 28 years now, which is crazy to say. I started off as an IT recruiter at a small privately held staffing company, and this is actually before job boards. I think they existed, but I didn't actually start using them. So just to give you a little bit of history there. But I got really good at leveraging systems, and I did very well. And so I started to lead and train people, and eventually I moved my career back and forth between two major staffing companies, Kforce and Randstad. I've actually been at each company twice now. And then, yes, I've definitely built and led teams, but I've also progressively over the past 15 years spent a lot of time evaluating and implementing technology. And of course, AI is a part of that. And most recently, the past 2 years, I work in an advisory role, and I'm in demand with specific requests around how to leverage generative AI specifically within the recruitment lifecycle.
Great. No, I'm super excited for this conversation. And, as we know, AI is a game changer, obviously, but it depends on how staffing companies approach it. And obviously, a company like Randstad, one of the largest staffing enterprises in the world, operates differently than many other staffing companies out there. So to zoom out and discuss how Randstad thinks about AI, I would love to hear your perspective on that. And how does that AI fit into your broader talent strategy at an enterprise level?
Yeah, certainly we're not alone in being global, but being global and at that scale, it means that we do have to think about things a little bit differently if you're not at the same scale, because we have to start thinking about all of the various regulations around the world. But when it comes to how AI fits into our broader talent strategy and what the problems that we're looking to solve are, I would say it's probably not surprising to hear that we think we take a very strategic approach to AI. It's not about chasing and adopting every new tool. It comes down to integrating AI in a way that really aligns with our core business objectives, our talent strategy, and of course, our client needs. We have to focus primarily on what are the problems we're trying to solve. And even though that's often said and repeated, sometimes it's easy to forget, especially when there's so much happening in the space of technology and AI these days. It's easy to get distracted and have the fear of missing out. And, we have to take action now, but we have to ground ourselves back into what is it we're actually trying to do? What are the problems we're trying to solve, both internally and also for talent as well as clients?
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. And, when we think about AI, AI can be applied in so many different ways. Resume parsing, candidate matching, chatbots, predictive analytics, and much more. Do you have specific use cases or initiatives that Randstad has already implemented or is currently experimenting with that are already or making already an impact on the organization?
Yeah. So you listed some of them. Parsing is obviously very important just from the perspective of, well, actually, I'll back up for a moment. When you start thinking about an AI strategy, you really can't have an AI strategy without a data strategy. And so that's where parsing is one of the main elements where it comes in to take, structured and unstructured data and then turn it into structured data that can then be properly leveraged by AI and to maximum effect. Certainly search and match, that's the core of what anyone does in staffing. You're matching, talent supply with talent demand, and AI, with the continual evolution and advancements in the space of AI, and even moving into, large language model powered solutions, you're getting progressively increasing capabilities to have more accurate matches. I do have to bounce back to the data strategy because that also ties into AI, where you can use chatbots and AI pre-screening solutions that are able to gather additional information. So it's one thing to say we're going to use AI-powered parsing to deconstruct someone's CV. It's another to then say we're going to ask them questions where they might be actually able to provide us with information beyond what is stated in their CV. Things like motivations and aspirations and preferences. So when you get a better understanding of what a person has done and what a person wants to do, that enriched data set then gives the AI even more to work with when it comes to finding more personalized and relevant matches. And there's chatbots, which are primarily text-based, like SMS and WhatsApp or web. Then, of course, you have voice recruiter agents, which is relatively new on the scene. So that's something that we're also experimenting with. And, of course, predictive analytics to try to forecast talent demand and figure out where demand is increasing, where we might have to increase our supply correspondingly. And I'd say, there's so many more, but I'd say one more category would be AI-powered assessment tools would be another area.
Yeah, absolutely. So across the whole life cycle.
Totally. Yeah.
And of course, obviously adopting AI at scale, I can imagine for an organization like yours is probably not easy. Implementation in theory sounds easy, but there's major challenges probably, right? From choosing the right technology, managing change, data privacy, compliance, a lot to navigate. When you look at the implementation of new technology, specifically in AI, what challenges have you faced, and what would you give as a recommendation to maybe another staffing leader that is watching today to take into consideration when implementing a new technology?
I would say it definitely begins with the proper evaluation, and it all depends on the markets that you're operating in. But because we're operating in so many markets around the world, we also tend to default to taking a little bit more of a risk-averse approach to evaluating technologies. The bar that we set for technology tends to be pretty high. There's a lot of technologies that are coming out of the U.S. and one of the first things that I have to ask these solutions is, are you fully GDPR compliant? Are you compliant with the EU AI Act? And these are things that some of these solutions haven't thought about yet because they're just so focused on the U.S. market, which is fine, right? But for a company like ours, we're not looking to have a different solution in each country or region. We're ideally looking for solutions that we can leverage across, literally across the globe. So a lot of it comes down to identifying vendors and solution partners that we can work with globally, which means that they're going to be typically on the forefront of responsible AI, ethical AI, transparency, explainability, etc. That's going to be top of mind for us. You touched upon another huge one, which is the change management. I can't tell you enough that not only for us at Randstad, but also our clients, the number one reason why people end up buying a technology and then saying it doesn't work is actually not the technology. It's actually the company either didn't do their due diligence in figuring out, can this technology actually solve our problems? It also comes down to, did you configure it properly? And what was your change management plan? Because you can't just say, we're going to touch nothing with regard to our existing processes. We're going to drop in a new technology and magically everyone is just going to adapt, because I've never seen that happen. I'd say change management is probably the number one challenge. So once you identify the right technology that actually does meet your needs and is going to help you solve those problems, the technology won't just work because you've implemented it. I think people continue to underestimate the importance and the difficulty of change management.
Yeah, absolutely. So evaluating, but also then taking the lead as a staffing leader and making sure that the adoption from your users is taken care of.
You could have the best technology, but if you don't implement it properly and you're not actually training, and the training, it's not just enough to train. We've seen this ourselves. Sometimes things that you would assume you would be able to roll out in 6 months ends up taking a lot longer than that. And it's just because we're dealing with people, and people don't like change. And, that's just, that's human nature. So the better you can figure out how to deal with that human nature, the more successful you'll be, and the shorter the timeline you'll have to full implementation and productivity.
Yeah. And talking about change, the AI isn't just changing how we source and match, but it's also transforming the role of the recruiter. Some argue that recruiters will become, AI agent operators, while others, still believe that the human element in hiring will remain. How do you see the role of the recruiter evolving in the next 5 years, as AI takes on more of the heavy lifting?
All right. So I love this question. You kind of led me. I'll tell you my opinion, but I'll also show you that I'm objective enough to know that there are going to be solutions that are going to be able to automate significantly within staffing. In fact, fully automate, at least in areas of the world where you can do that. But there's plenty of areas in the world where you can't, due to automated decision-making and regulations. But from my hands-on use of technology, I can tell you that there are many things that AI can do as well or better than people. But I also, I'd say the one variable that nobody has really solved for yet is how will talent respond to that? And it's one thing, and there's two sides though to this, is that if somebody has applied to a role, we've found, and we've seen technology vendors that have really good data around the fact that if I'm an applicant, I don't mind talking to a chatbot or having a voice-to-voice, AI initial pre-screening conversation. I'm interested in the role. I'll go ahead and participate in that. Would they prefer that? Not always, but they'll put up with that because that's what they're going to do for the job. There's another side of recruiting that happens often in staffing, is that when you don't have enough applicants, you actually have to start sourcing and reaching out to people that may not actively be looking. And that's the one area where I don't want to make assumptions, but I have my theories around how people will respond to an AI recruiter who's actually trying to recruit them. And I mean the verb of recruiting, which is talking to someone who wasn't previously looking to make a change, having that discovery conversation and being able to convert that person into a candidate who would be willing to make a change for a particular opportunity.
Like how value would they be, feel?
It is so fascinating because I have theories around the fact that some people, especially I think IT workers, might find it fascinating to work with a technological, literally an AI recruiter. There also could be elements of feeling less pressure, right? Because even though AI is actually very good at influence, it may not feel the same. It may not feel as if it's a pressure-driven conversation that they're trying to get me to do something like make a change for my job when I don't want to. It's going to be fascinating. But going back to your, the core of your question, certainly the role is going to evolve significantly. I am hoping to see them move into more of talent advisors. I do believe that there are going to be some segments of staffing where you won't have to talk to the talent if the talent doesn't want to talk to a person. We've seen that outside of staffing. On our PO side of things, we have customers that we know have implemented a solution that has literally almost automated 90% of the top of the funnel, and they're not talking to anybody. So we know that it works, but we also feel like it depends on the type of talent you're working with. And also, I think a very sound digital strategy is being able to offer people choice and control. So if they want to go through an automated process or primarily automated process, we should let them do that. We should have an experience for them. But if someone says, hey, and also due to regulation, but also personal preference, I don't want to deal with an AI. I actually want to talk to a person. A company should be able to do that. So I feel like the evolution of staffing is going to be, for those who are really going to be adaptive to the future, they're going to have to be able to look at the offering both ends of the spectrum, like the no touch, human touch, and then the high human touch.
Also depends on the industry vertical and segments.
Absolutely. A lot of variation there.
Exactly. We talked a lot about AI being used today, but maybe we can also talk a little bit about the industry as a whole. Some see it as a disruption, but some see it as an opportunity. I personally see it as a very big opportunity. I think it's the best time to actually start building a staffing company with less people, more automation, and automate the whole business. How do you see the industry transforming as a whole, and also the traditional staffing business model that we've seen so far?
If you'll allow me, I guess I'll use, for people that appreciate this analogy, the Blockbuster analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those who have been around long enough, or at least know from a business case, you have video rental stores, and Netflix came onto the scene, and they didn't have physical stores. They were at the time mailing DVDs, and it's a very famous story. I think it was even twice that Netflix tried to sell themselves to Blockbuster. In both cases, Blockbuster are like, no, this is a joke. And we all know how that turned out. And I think that's part of the challenge that we might be facing in the staffing industry, is that as you pointed out, you're going to have some new entrants into the staffing space that are going to be unburdened of this is the way we've always done it. And they'll be able to look at it and literally design solutions from the ground up today, leveraging technologies that didn't exist to any of the established staffing players, 5-10 years ago, even with generative AI. It's going to be an interesting time. I do think it's going to be a combination of the threat of disruption, because companies are going to be smart, and they should be trying to disrupt existing business models. That's just how the world of business works. And then you have the larger, more established players, and you could even be a small established player. And you just have to be aware of this disruption is coming, and you can either be disrupted by others, or you can disrupt yourself. And I think that's really what it comes down to. But that is a challenge. We've seen many companies, as I used in my analogy, that some people just can't see it coming, and it will unfortunately end it for some businesses.
Yeah, exciting. I actually saw the Blockbuster map evolution on LinkedIn today. I think it started in 1980, and then they had over 5,000 locations, and around 2002 it started going down to almost zero again. So it's it was interesting to see.
Well, if you give me just another moment, the Netflix Blockbuster is actually a really good example for another reason, because although Netflix started out selling the subscription DVDs and sending it to the mail, there was a point in time where they created a separate business unit within the business that had the streaming, right? And streaming was, everyone's used to it now, but people often forget in the beginning that was a strange concept, and almost no one did it. And people loved their DVDs that they got in the mail and they sent back and forth. But what was really smart about Netflix is that they essentially disrupted themselves. They put one portion of their business out of business by switching, but they ran both at the same time for a period of time and actually had them compete, which I think is a really good way to go about it in our space.
How would you compare it to our space? Like, what would be the analogy with the traditional DVD and the streaming? Would you say it's like self-service? Is it like the Upwork type self-service platform, or how do you envision that maybe?
I would say there would be a degree of self-service, although I still feel I stand by what I said earlier around digital strategies, that it's one thing to say the only way you can work with us is digitally. It's nice. And this is where some established players, whether you're small, medium, or really large, like we are, there's going to be a scenario where clients are going to say self-service is nice, but I need to talk to somebody. I need some help through this process. And you should still be able to allow customers to be able to engage you in the way they need it. So I'm not saying that a business couldn't exist fully digital. I guarantee you there's some that are already at that point. I know for a fact that there are at least 3 companies that have gotten into the executive search space that are using probably AI for 80 to 90% of the process, which is fascinating, because you think of executive search as like the highest end staffing that there can be. And it's all about relationships. And some of these companies are showing that it's not really accurate. Now, there's still a very small percentage of the players in the space, and it will take a long time. And you're still going to have people that are like, I want to talk to a person. And then you're going to have other people saying, I like the new way. I do feel like it would be more fully automated in the areas where it can be fully automated. But let's also point something interesting out when it comes to staffing, is that you could have a client hiring manager that's actually the person that's the human in the loop. So it doesn't necessarily even need to be a staffing employee that is the human in the loop. It can actually be the client and who's making the decisions. So you can, basically mitigate the whole automated decision-making element by moving over and having the hiring manager be the individual that's making all the decisions.
Yeah. No, I compared a little bit to the real estate market. I think it's like the Netflix comparison is okay, but the purchase prices for Netflix are very low. But in the real estate market, if you're purchasing an apartment or a house, you can search and discover everything online, but you still want that person, maybe that agent, to talk to when making the final decision. So I compare that a little bit in the staffing market. So maybe to a certain degree, you maybe want to discover and find the talent, but then at a certain point in time, you want to have that recruiter or that human touch to finalize it. Yeah.
The travel industry is another one like that. And I can say for myself, I do a lot of research myself, but I do like working with an expert. So it'll be interesting though, because there could be some generational challenges where as things start moving forward, you have people that are more digital native who are like, well, I never really had that. So I never expected or wanted. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how things change over time as the generations start to move.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Glen, this has been a very insightful conversation, and we covered a lot today. Before we wrap up, do you have, any takeaways that you want to give to the staffing leaders in the audience, about AI or anything that you can give them to help them in their business?
I would say, well, maybe a few things. One is, I know mostly in this conversation, we've talked about solutions, right? Purpose-built solutions like matching and parsing and chatbots. But I think that it's important that companies also see the value in upskilling their current employees on the use of generative AI solutions that you can bring into the enterprise and even use for free for some use cases where if you're not entering in any PII or any sensitive, confidential, or proprietary information, there's so many use cases where you can use a free large language model and get a lot of benefit. Obviously, if you're dealing sensitive information, you want to use an enterprise private and secure version. But what I'm finding is that, and this is just given the size of our company, right? We can't just snap our fingers and train, 40,000 people overnight and they're all experts. So we're on the process of figuring out how do we upskill all of our people around the world. And I'm a part of that process. So we're implementing online training, but we're coupling the online training with live, hands-on, practical training, because we found that that's how people, they learn the best that way. So my advice is, it's one thing to look at solutions that your people will be using, like CRM, right? It's another to say, how can my employees use generative AI today to do their work better? And it's not just about using AI for like low-level, repetitive, tedious tasks. That's another piece of advice I'd provide. I feel that every time I hear that and I read it in an article, sure, you should use AI for tedious, low-end, repetitive tasks. But you can also use generative AI for high-end cognitive tasks. The large language models today are as smart or smarter than most people. They're only going to get smarter. They have a larger knowledge base than any one human can ever have. And so why wouldn't you challenge them at a peer level or even at a subject matter expert level? So almost any cognitive task that's associated with staffing on the recruiting or the sales side, I know from personal experience, these are things that we can all benefit from. So although we have talked mostly about solutions, I feel like it's very important that people are looking at upskilling all their employees on how to safely, responsibly, and effectively use generative AI tools, just like large language models, to be able to improve the quality of their work and even improve, their productivity throughout the day. So it's not just about tools, it's also about using these as kind of like expert assistants.
Expert assistants, yeah, actually. Everybody has their own expert assistant now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Glen, that's a very, very great advice. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and giving us the behind the scenes look at how a global leader like Randstad is navigating AI. Thanks everybody else for joining today. If you'd like to continue learning more about Glen's work, feel free to follow Glen on LinkedIn. And thanks again. And I'm looking forward to the next session. Thank you, Glen, for joining today.
Thank you very much.